We're going to devote our energies to sports and gardening, all the cultural pursuits as far as they're concerned. In fact, we're going to put the goons to sleep. Meanwhile, we dig.
Greetings from Tbilisi, Georgia. This is Byrne, the Anadromist, and welcome back to our series on time. This is the second to the last one of the official series. There are a couple of small addendums that will be very short, but these, or even as they're needed, something might happen in the future that's time related that I might need to comment on. So we'll leave that addenda open-ended. But we're going to now go back to talking about time. I've been trying to explain that time is not simply related to the clock and our measurement of time, but it is related to, it is personal. That is to say, our relationships in time are all individual, unique. No two things happen at the same time. You cannot stand inside of anyone's shoes because not only could you not physically get there in time, but you also can't, even if you could somehow magically transport yourself, say, into my body. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but even if you could, you couldn't see with my experience. So, that is to say, you couldn't see out of my eyes. So we're going to talk about time, and this last time we talked about love and evil and time, and how I explained that time, basically we've had this misunderstanding about time that made it subservient to space. So that our matter and energy became so important to the modern outlook on the world. And the world was seen as this place of matter, and then later it was modified to energy. So that all the things that seemed important to people were just what you could weigh and measure. But by reincorporating a time perspective, we can then see that the other things you can't weigh and measure are just as important. So things like love, truth, beauty, meaning, our words, none of these things can be weighed and measured. And yet, very clearly, my words are not simply somewhere in space. They're not simply energy vibrations. There's something else going on here. It's a relationship in time. Yet we live in a society that's all about breaking that relationship in time. We live against time. We live as if we could just keep speeding things up and there won't be a problem. Much like the cocaine addict is trying to live faster, or the meth addict trying to live faster. Our society is essentially addicted to uppers, addicted to some sort of thing that keeps things going quickly. And to cope with that, it needs things that are downers or narcotics to bring one down. So we get stuck. I knew someone who was kind of on a beer and coffee regimen, where in the morning she would drink really hardcore amounts of French coffee. And then that would get her so buzzed that she would spend the rest of the later part of the day drinking too much beer. And you can see this very strange cycle. But in a sense, that's our whole society, is that we have so distorted our relationship to time that we need all these artificial technological fixes to help us manage our time, because we're doing a really bad job of it. So what is the answer to the dilemma? How do we learn to live in time again? That's a bit what we're going to talk about today. First of all, we have to go back and ask, what is the foundation of everything? And is it matter? That is to say, are the little balls, the little atoms, are those the foundation of everything? Is it energy? That is to say, is it the things that keep the matter, is it the things that keep the matter moving? Well, in a sense, it is the thing that keeps the matter moving, but that's a relationship. So what I would say is, and without getting into science, and again, I'm no scientist, it's hard to know the difference sometimes between matter and energy. That's for physicists to discuss. That's way too big for me. But what's interesting to me is this. People will often say things like, I'm spiritual, but not religious, which strikes me as close to saying, I just do whatever I want, as you can possibly say. That is to say, I don't want organized religion. I want just to believe whatever I want to believe. So I'm spiritual, not religious. Those people don't really have any belief structure. Those people are basically saying, things are too big for me. I don't define things. A very postmodern perspective to say, I don't define things. You have to kind of define a few things if you want to live. But as we look at the most basic building blocks of the universe, we find that even the atomic particles are not merely static. What this means is that they are, there's nothing as simple as little balls in space. We are not just people in space. We're not images on a photograph. We're not frozen in time. We are, in fact, very much in relationship to things. And with the discovery of the subatomic world, we see that even the smaller and smaller particles, the things, are somehow being held in something like space. Again, these aren't little specks of matter. They are swirling around each other. Now, that says to me that they are in some sort of relationship. The great mystery is what holds them together. Now, I'm a Christian. I would say God. But that might be too simplistic to say. But nevertheless, I think that's a pretty good answer. Nevertheless, something keeps them, whoever you are, you have to come up with an answer to this question. What keeps things together? Why is there, am I just an appearance? I think the modernist perspective is to see the world as matter and to become a materialist. I think the postmodern perspective is to see, now that we know, a little bit about, physics, enough to know that everything is basically empty space. You'll hear people say, to me, that's a postmodern perspective. Because now they're saying, essentially, we're completely insubstantial, therefore we can define things any way we want. You cannot define things any way you want. The point of saying that each atom is actually an ocean of, movement within it, or that I am largely water made up of cells. Each cell is so complex, and yet there's a lot of emptiness inside of it. All of these complex ideas. The point is not simply that we don't exist. The point is that we certainly do exist. And yet, what holds it all together? What stops me from, say, becoming the atoms in the floor? Now, here's the funny thing is, if we go back to entropy, I will eventually become the atoms in the floor. But I will become the atoms in the floor. Eventually, everything goes from a state of order to disorder, order to less usable order. And I think that we aren't insubstantial phantoms. We aren't just these insubstantial phantoms in this universe of bounded infinity, whatever that means. We are in relationship. All the subatomic particles are in relationship. All the cells in my body are in relationship. It is a solid relationship, solid enough that I feel it when I touch it. And those feelings are real. And you can say, well, what is reality, Byrne? But I would say, you really need to get off the acid and start looking at what's actually around you and start dealing with the people and the relationships that are around you. It's not simply about your perception. It's about the relationships you have with people. I am not the center of the universe. We are all in relationship. And that relationship is of different separate things that are tied together somehow. And the question is, what ties us together? Well, here's the point, is that what ties us together are relationships in time. And the problem with whether the psychedelic philosophies or our entertainment systems that we have created is that they visualize us, turn us into spatial creatures. We find that swiping on Facebook is more central to our lives than the actual people sitting in the room next to you, because it's easier, much easier, to take those digital images and to think that that is somehow a concrete reality, where the person sitting next to you takes time to understand. So yeah, even digital photography, as phantom-like as it is something that you need to spend time to look at those photos. Although the problem is we create so many that if we spend too much time taking photos and looking at them, you don't live anymore. And it's the living and the relationship that is so important. It is, so here's my understanding now. What is the most foundational thing in the universe? It's not the cells, it's not the atoms, it's not the energy. It is the relationships that hold them together. It is the code within them, which is somehow understandable. I mean, that's what science shows us. It's amazing how much we can understand. We can understand our relationships in time and space well enough to send someone to Mars. We understand enough that we know what your body needs to consume in order to help it, and what kind of things it consumes that it doesn't need. And it's amazing how many of the things that we consume that we don't need are precisely things that adjust our relationships in time, because we're kind of living in a strange world that is destroying the effect of time. So here's the point. Relationships are the most foundational thing in the world. Everything is in relationship in time. Why is a lie so bad? A lie is a very little thing. Someone says, did you do that work? And you go like, well, yeah, you haven't. But you say, yeah, I've done that work, and you're hoping you're going to get it done before it's discovered you didn't do the work. That's the kind of lie we often tell on a daily basis. That kind of like you're pressed into a little corner and you realize, rather than saying, no, but I'm going to try to get it done, which would be more honest. But you're afraid for whatever reason of being exposed. Well, why is the lie so bad? Because even though the other person that you're telling it to doesn't realize it at the time, and maybe they will never realize it, you've broken your relationship with that person. So from what I was talking about last week, one of the things I forgot to mention is evil seems to be related to our choice to break relationships in time, and to it's that is to say, if relationship is central, evil is the thing that breaks that relationship. And everything that's evil ultimately, I think, has to break a relationship, whether it's with ourselves, with God, with the universe around us, with the ecology, with our friends, our parents, our animals, everything. So that the thing that hurts is the thing that breaks and severs relationships. What is good then is what builds relationships, and builds relationships in time. And what is most evil is the things that are the shortcuts that we take to build relationships, because ultimately there are no shortcuts. Everything takes time. So yeah, we are paying for our global tourism and all the traveling we're doing by our pollution. You know, we've broken a relationship in order to get there. Can we turn it back? I don't know. I really don't know. And I think the people who want to turn it back now are just as wrong for breaking another relationship. They're willing to be fanatical in order to, and yet break a relationship because they think the planet is more important than the individuals on the planet, whom they are willing to sacrifice in order to restore the planet to something pristine which doesn't exist. So to live in time is to build upon relationships which cannot be shortcut. Consider our relationship to food. Now, I live in America. In America, we have endless shortcuts to food consumption and production. And so one of the interesting things is I live in Tbilisi, Georgia now, and I just had some friends visiting, and they were really surprised by how little food here is for, you go into a store, how little of it is for immediate consumption, and most of it is the ingredients you have to go home and cook. And even in the biggest stores here, like the Carrefour or other large stores, most of the products here you have to take and do something to at home. So there's still a culture of cooking here. Now, back in the USA, you walk through a grocery style in a place, grocery style. Yeah, the style of the grocery. You walk through a grocery store in a place like Alaska, which has, grocery stores, obviously. And, I was living there for 22 years. But even Alaska, in which a lot of things are, you do at home, there's still endless, you go through the freezer section there. It's amazing the quantity of stuff you can just pick up, take home, look at it, and it's cooked, So I think and there's some problem there. How are we paying for that problem? We're paying for that problem with our weight. We're paying for that problem with diabetes. We're paying for that problem with garbage and pollution. We're paying for that product. It's like people are, we have a substance which is really perfect for containing liquids. It's called glass. There's one big problem with that substance. If you drop it, it breaks. And so but the nice thing is you can reuse glass. You can melt it back again. You can clean out the bottle and use it over and over again. But sometime in the late 20th century, people started saying, what the market really wants is, when you drop the bottle, it doesn't break. So we shifted to plastic. And also, people started realizing, with these plastic bottles and stuff, people want to drink more water. And so suddenly, all this water came in plastic bottles around the same time. Individual plastic bottles. As George Carlin once said, he didn't get why people were thirsty. He said, get a drink before you leave home. And I still don't understand why everyone talks, in America now, everyone talks about being hydrated. They used to get thirsty, now they get hydrated, like they're doing something scientific. It's just like, just drink. Just have a drink of water and don't carry around all these plastic bottles. What's so hard about that? But it just gets so hot and, it's just like,
Now what happened in this country that now suddenly everyone is walking around with their own personal bottle of water? When did we get so thirsty in America? Is everybody so dehydrated they have to have their own portable supply of fluids with them at all times? Get a drink before you leave the house.
Anyway, our wanting this perfect world creates a broken world. In other words, our not wanting things to break creates a world that's truly broken. Wanting the perfect world where you can drop your bottles and it never breaks has created the plastic nightmare of the oceans, where, even the little particles that eventually, it's incredible what we get for wanting a world where we're totally safe and, nobody's going to step on broken glass. Thank God beer still comes in bottles for legal reasons. But, our whole relationship to food has changed and broken because we want things instantly, we want things perfectly, and perfection is weird because it breaks things. The world isn't perfect. We have to learn to live in an imperfect world. Instead, the desire for perfection, well, quite frankly, the desire for perfection has created most of the most nightmarish symptoms of the entire history of the human race. Why was the Inquisition done by the Catholics? They wanted perfect faith. Why did the communists kill so many people? They wanted a perfect world. Why did the Nazis kill so many people? They wanted perfect blood. Anytime anyone talks about perfection, you should back away because you are looking at someone who will allow the system to kill you. They won't do it themselves. They're usually too cowardly. But the system that they set up will sweep everything along with it. You cannot have a perfect world. Give it up. You have to live in time. Time doesn't allow you to have a perfect world. Relationships are always messy. Always messy. So this desire to live against time has created essentially people who are like photographs. They want to look stylish. They want to look new. They want to look shiny, happy people. Essentially, they want to be photographs, which makes us a couple of things. One is it makes us thin. Thin as a photograph. Hollow as a photograph. Shallow. And people today are becoming tremendously shallow. Everything we do is immediate consumption. So whether it's our food, our entertainment, health, our resources, our information, and ultimately our human relationships and ourselves have all become shallow, thin entertainments. Bob Dylan did this great song called Ballad of a Thin Man. And it's a song really worth listening to, but I'm not going to play it right now, but go find it. You know something's happening here, but you don't know what it is. We are thin, existentially thin, philosophically thin, teleologically thin. We have no purpose. I think that's the great value of someone like Jordan Peterson. I don't agree with everything he says, but when he talks about the fact that you need meaning to live, you need a purpose, he's absolutely right. The other problem is that this living, this existence as human photographs means it's all about the self, hence the selfie. It's amazing, absolutely incredible how many photographs have been taken since the invention, particularly of the iPhone, of people taking pictures of themselves. I mean, I'm not going to claim I've never taken a photo of myself. I am actually using a video to take an image of myself right now. But I'm not posing. I'm trying to be as honest as possible. I'm not putting on a duck face. I'm not, it's amazing how many videos or images you see now of people standing in front of a mirror with the selfie in their hand, looking at the phone, taking a picture of themselves in a mirror. It's just, it creates extraordinarily self-conscious people. And by self-conscious, I don't mean that they're aware of themselves. I mean they're only aware of their visual essence. They're aware of how they look, but not how they are. They have no sense of history. They have this is not connected to, culture and memory or anything like this. They are essentially amnesiacs. But this self-consciousness is a real curse. It is, in a sense, the postmodern curse. Because if we are all just living in emptiness, then we can be whatever we want. But then that puts all of the weight upon us to become this visual image for now. Just the consumption of now. And yesterday doesn't matter. As I've mentioned before, yesterday is kind of boring to most people. It's all about now. Well, as long as it's all about now, we're doomed. Period. We're doomed. If it's all about now, that's it. So the question is how to get out of this self-consciousness. In my next and last official part of the time series, I'm going to talk about history and memory. And these are two aspects that are extremely important to understanding how to get out of now. But let me talk about how to get to history and memory before I do, and to get out of the self-consciousness. Let me read you something by Michael Polanyi from his book Personal Knowledge. Michael Polanyi wrote this, and I'm going to maybe explain a little bit along the way to help you understand his terms. He talks about two things. One is subsidiary awareness and focal awareness. So subsidiary awareness are things that are happening that, like you're riding a bicycle and you have a subsidiary awareness of the fact that you're riding a bicycle. You have a focal awareness on the road up ahead. So if you had a focal awareness of the road up ahead, that's how you get there. You get there by seeing the road up ahead. But if suddenly you put your focal awareness on the bicycle and how you're actually staying upright, which is quite mysterious. How do you not fall on a bicycle? Well, I'll tell you how you fall. Take your focal awareness off of the road up ahead and put it to your pedals. And ask yourself, how am I staying up? You will fall almost instantly. Why? You're not looking at the road up ahead anymore, for one thing. So you have no idea where you're going. And two, it's like you're playing a piano. And instead of thinking about the music, you're thinking about the piano keys and your fingers on them. Well, when you're first learning the piano, maybe you have to do that. You have to think about how you do it. But that's why you do exercises over and over and over again, so that you are aware of the music that you should be playing, and you should know the keyboard well enough, like you know how to stay upright on a bicycle. You should know, and obviously this is much more difficult than riding a bicycle, or else everyone would play the piano. You should be aware of where all the keys are without thinking about it. If you have to think about it, your focal awareness suddenly goes to the keyboard, the music stops. Let me read this from Michael Polanyi, now that I've given you the basic principle, and he'll mention some of this as well. This is from page 56 in Personal Knowledge. Subsidiary awareness and focal awareness are mutually exclusive. If a pianist shifts his attention from the piece he is playing to the observation of what he is doing with his fingers while playing it, he gets confused and may have to stop. This happens generally if we switch our focal attention to the particulars of which we had previously been aware only in their subsidiary role. The kind of clumsiness which in fact is due to the fact that focal attention is directed to the subsidiary elements of an action is commonly known as self-consciousness. Let me read that again. The kind of clumsiness which is due to the fact that focal attention is directed to the subsidiary elements of an action is commonly known as self-consciousness. This is also what happens in stage fright, which he's about to say, and this becomes very important. A serious and sometimes incurable form of it is stage fright. It seems to consist in the anxious riveting of one's attention to the next word, or the note or gesture that one has to find. This destroys one's sense of the context, which alone can smoothly evoke the proper sequence of words, notes, or gestures. And here's the answer to how to eliminate self-consciousness. Stage fright is eliminated and fluency recovered if we succeed in casting our mind forward and let it operate with a clear view of the comprehensive activity in which we are primarily interested. And let me put it to you in a different way. Okay, this is where we are. We are like a person on a stage. We're standing there. Our grasp of the lines of what comes next is gotten a little loose in our head, and we start thinking about the words, and then the eyes of the audience start to look at our eyes, and we start feeling trapped in that moment. This is what stage fright is. You're trapped suddenly between the realization that you can't go forward and they are looking at you. And now how do you get out of that? The answer is, as he says here, to look to the future. In a play, what you would do to get over stage fright is you have to, for instance, maybe the actor realizes, a good actor will realize, oh, I'm in trouble. And it happens, you get distracted by something, suddenly you tripped over your words, you don't know what's going on, you get stuck in that moment. A good actor can recover. And they might do something by maybe saying a line a little bit further down that they remember, that they know is coming up. And maybe the other actors can react and say, Byrne's lost, let's help him. But the actor in trouble could also say something like, did someone just die? They know there's a death scene somewhere coming up. Or is someone in love? They make up something that sounds roughly, and then the other actors will realize that this person's in trouble and will say something like, no one has died, but they might. And then they will steer the dialogue back to where it should be. Now, the problem with us is that we're not only trapped in this feeling, as I pointed out before, the reason people don't sing together anymore in, say, America and Western Europe is because so much of the time they see themselves singing. In other words, they become aware of the subsidiary action of singing. They will see themselves singing like people in a stupid comedy, or children in church will see themselves singing in these are dorky songs. It doesn't help when the new, modern loosey-goosey pop praise songs are all also dorky in themselves. So that makes it double, and they do that because there were people had trouble singing, say, 50 years ago. So they created these more repetitious songs to get people singing. Well, after a while, this just creates a world where, okay, so we'll do this to help you do that. and it becomes even more self-conscious. So the new, for instance, Christian praise songs are much more self-conscious, and they're all saying things like, "We believe," over and over again. These repetitious lines that make you feel like the people don't actually believe, but they're trying to work up the emotion. Anyway, that's a nightmare. We'll put that over there. But here's the process. So now we are all like this person on stage, and the stage is the internet, and the stage is the fact that everyone knows what their voice sounds like now, and they immediately are like, "Oh, my voice sounds like this," and you can compare the way you look. Women in Georgia, beautiful women in Georgia, get nose jobs to look like women in Hollywood. There's nothing wrong with a beautifully long Georgian nose. But people in Hollywood don't have that. Of course, they're all going under the knife too. That's the nightmare of self-consciousness, that we want to only appear a certain way. The reality of who you are is a totally different story. So, added to our problem is we are like an actor on stage, stuck at a certain point, looking out into the audience. The eyes are on us, but we also have a television camera on us. See, I can do this. I can talk to you because I don't care. I care that I look okay. I don't care that I look perfect. Yeah, I got a chipped tooth here. You may have noticed that. Why didn't I ever get it fixed? Because I realized that the process of getting it fixed would be more problematic than just leaving it as it is. That is to say, it would create other problems. I won't go into all of that. But the point is, it's not about perfection. It's the point that I care more about the message than what I look like. I care more about communicating than I do about how am I looking cool. I am not cool. Happy to be that way. Happy to just be Byrne, whatever that means. And last time anyone ever told me I was cool, I told them, don't ever say that again. I am not cool. And I mean that. It's like if a person says that to me, I will cut them down. Anyway, but here's the thing. How to get out of our cultural self-consciousness. We have to remember what this story was about. See, modern and then postmodern philosophy has told us that the basis of everything is distrust. You have to distrust the ground you're standing on. It's, after all, just all empty atoms. There's nothing, you're not really on anything. You have to distrust all social discourse because really we're all just lab rats pressing on pedals to get food from and sex from each other. We just want these basic needs. Like we want the race to survive, whatever that means. I don't think people really care about the race surviving. I think people only care kind of about themselves. They care about their image on a selfie, which will be consumed this afternoon on Instagram. That's what they care about. They don't care about. And what it looked like 10 years ago, who cares? We care about now. We don't live in time. But to get out of self-consciousness, one has to start asking some very pertinent questions. Because one has to realize you're in stage fright. Existential living stage fright. You're stuck, as this image that everyone's looking at, wondering how I appear. There used to be a few videos that came out, I remember back several years ago, where some young girl would say, what do you think of how I look? And you make a video of a girl like, 14 years old asking this on the internet. And of course, all these people say, oh, you're beautiful, blah, 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 blah. Which, of course, that girl would never believe because she asked the question. She's fishing for compliments.
So, and I want people that I don't know to tell me the truth. So, y'all tell me if y'all think I'm pretty or not.
So, how to get out of self-consciousness? Well, you have to try to remember what this was all about in the first place. And that is to say, those other things like love, beauty, joy, peace, truth, those big things which The modern and postmodern worlds have taught us to distrust because you can't weigh and measure them, or they're all whatever you think they are. You have to start asking about those things again. Do things mean anything? Do human relationships mean anything? Are we simply lab rats running through some program? Or is our communication real? I'm convinced it's absolutely real. And when I stopped worrying about the noise and started thinking about the meaning of things, I found that my relationships worked out fine. Not perfectly. I make big mistakes. Who can go through life without making mistakes in your human relationships? But nevertheless, my basic overall goal is to understand, and to understand how to speak, so that sometimes you have to take the time to practice so you know where the keys on the keyboard are. So the point is this, and we'll leave it here for today. You have to connect to the larger story. You have to get past your self-consciousness. And the only way to start doing that is to start asking, where are we in this story? Where are we in the play? The play is the thing, as Shakespeare said. Where are we in it? All of us are players on the stage, and we all play different parts. What part are we playing right now? What are you supposed to be doing? So we have to understand some other things, and this is what we'll end with next week. We have to understand our story, and that means our history. How did we get to wherever we are? How did you end up in whatever place you are in? Whether it's, Sweden or Nevada or, Shanghai. How did you end up in that place? You didn't just, you were born there, or maybe you moved there, or, you decided to go to the Czech Republic, or you're living in New York City, or, how did I get to Alaska? How did you get there? That's your story. Then you have to ask, what's your relationship to the larger history around you? And I'll give you a clue. Many of the ideas that you hold are not your own. They belong to the larger story around you. And in order to engage with that story and to question what you should believe versus what you shouldn't believe, you have to ask more questions about the history of how your world got to the place it is. I don't mean the huge story. Who can understand what's happening in the globe? But, the story of your area, the story of your country, these kinds of things. So you need to understand history. And most importantly, you need to access your memory. And we'll talk about that next week. But I want to give you a warning. And this is from Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He quotes this in the Gulag Archipelago. It's an old Russian proverb. And it says, no, don't dig up the past. Dwell on the past, and you'll lose an eye. So it sounds like Solzhenitsyn is saying, don't do what Byrne's about to tell you. However, this is the man who wrote the Gulag Archipelago, which was like 2,000 pages or so of remembering what happened in the Gulag Archipelago of the Soviet concentration camps. Well, of course, he didn't end it there. That's the Russian proverb. But the proverb goes on to say, he quotes, forget the past and you'll lose both eyes. I think that's brilliant. Dig up the past, remember the past, you'll lose an eye. Don't remember it, you'll lose both eyes. And that's where our choice. If you remember the past, it's painful. If you don't remember the past, it will become more painful for you to live. And we'll discuss that next week. So anyway, thanks for listening. I realize, I don't know, what you think of this, but if you have some thoughts, write them down. If you want to challenge me, write it down. If you want to thank me, you can write that down too. A really great way to thank me would be to become a contributor to the channel. And you can do that through PayPal. There's a link below. And people who give $10 a month or more can receive special behind the scenes extra content not available on YouTube. And people who, or if you contribute $50 or more at a whack, you can do that as well. But, you don't have to do that. I'm just happy if you like it. And if you do like it, hit the like button. That's important for me. Subscribe, please. Subscribe, hit the subscribe button. That would be really good. And remember, Anadromous means swimming against the stream. And G.K. Chesterton said, a dead thing goes with the stream. You have to be alive to swim against it. Be alive. Live the Anadromous life. This is Byrne from Tbilisi saying, we'll meet again very soon for the conclusion of the series on time. Talk to you later.
A people without history is not redeemed from time. For history is a pattern of timeless moments.
I'm glad you're here. Look, I need your help. Here's what happened. I had this blowout. I think there's a spare in the back. It may be a little flat. Take a look at it, will you, kid? Is there an airport any place around here? Look, if the spare is flat, don't bother fixing it. Give me a new tire, all right? You ain't got a new tire, then you'll have to fix the spare. But don't look at me. Move it, will you, kid? You can be gassing up while he's working. What is it, a staring contest? Come on. Move, will you, kid? Come on.